Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast. I'm Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud. We are so excited to be here today, you guys. I was out at a conference last week, so we had a pre-recorded episode for you about Generation Z.
An awesome conference, I imagine.
It was so great. It was with Alliance Defending Freedom.
Do you want to talk about a little bit about what that was about?
Sure. Okay, so, it's a little bit confidential because, ADF, they don't like it when people talk about all of the behind the scenes and everything. But they're a great organization. They're some of our allies. They actually have over 400 attorneys working for them now, which is crazy, but they defend religious freedom nationwide. They're also international now too, which is amazing. But basically there was a week-long conference in Virginia near DC, and they talked about, the first half was about life, which is of course my issue, and then the second half was on parental rights.
Grace is against death.
Whoa,
controversial.
Shocker. And then the second half was on parental rights, and I went to both because the life one was really good and encouraging, but it was more of like a repetition of things I know, and then the parental rights was good because it was things I didn't really know as much, or things that I didn't really know from a legal perspective.
Gotcha.
So that was really cool. It was also just good networking wise because there were so many other family policy council people, and it was great to just meet people that are in the same fight as me. So awesome. We are back. Just as a reminder, you guys, we come out with episodes every single Friday, so make sure you go subscribe on your preferred platform so that you can get the facts and stand for truth. Also, follow us on TikTok at MN Family Council. We do have a TikTok now, and on Instagram at MN Family Council to stay up to date, to see my beautiful face, to see Moses's somewhat less beautiful face, question mark?
I'm that's first of all, that's true, but second of all, I'm not on there. That's Grace's realm,
It's my job.
It's what she's good at, so I let her do that. But hey, you were telling us about the ADF thing, so can I just share something adorable?
Yes.
So my daughter Mary was wearing her Johnny Cash shirt today, and Brianna, during lunch, Brianna sent me a picture of Mary eating lunch, and Brianna says that she was playing the song "I Walk the Line" by Johnny Cash, and so now I'm going to try to do an impression of Mary's voice. Boy. And so Mary was like, "Is this song from God?" And I just thought Mary. That was so funny.
Wow.
Oh
my gosh, is
indirectly.
That a photo of Anselm?
Yep, and there's Anselm Thomas.
He's my heart.
He's 6
Wait,
months
how old?
old.
6 months. So cute. Moses is a very adoring father. It's
I
so
am
sweet.
An adoring
he posts
father.
so many pictures of his kids on Facebook. So if you're not friends with him on Facebook,
only
you're
like
missing
once
out.
a month.
Only? I feel like that's like a mom thing usually. Anyways, here's the rundown of what we'll be talking about today, you guys, because you guys just need to know, right? I feel like we get so carried away in the intro and I forget to...
After Grace has called me an ugly mom
No.
so far
okay.
in this episode.
Actually, the reason I paused when I said beauty is because I'm in this...
I really missed her so much while she was gone.
I'm in this philosophy of beauty class for school because I just started school. Also, senior, whoop.
With McLaughlin?
Yes, with McLaughlin.
I love
But
Professor
we were debating
McLaughlin.
if you should call guys beautiful or if you should call them handsome. So that's why I paused. Anyways.
Sure.
Here's what we'll be talking about today, you guys. 1, Moses is going to take some digs at me. No, okay. 1, we're going to be talking about some updating to Minnesota teacher licensing standards and the discrimination that is now adding into Minnesota statutes. Secondly, and just very dramatically also, we're going to be talking about pregnancy resource centers being attacked by Minnesota's Attorney General Ellison, and him basically just demonizing pregnancy resource centers, much like Elizabeth Warren did.
Yeah.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Moses, first of all, what on earth is the Minnesota Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, and what did they do?
I will tell you in a moment. I wanted to say to our listeners and viewers, we do apologize if there's a drilling sound in the background. They're doing something to the siding outside of our building, and we're 100 feet from it, but it still might show up on your audio, and I do apologize for that. So essentially, as you know, to be a teacher, you need to have a licensure. Now, we could probably get into whether teachers whether they actually need to be licensed, whether that's good, because obviously that creates a barrier into the profession of teaching, and probably most people are in favor of that. I don't know, but because when that happens, you are giving the state power to do things like this. So Grace asked, what is the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, and people call it PELSBA.
PELSBA.
So I'm going to refer to it as PELSBA.
Okay.
And it's an 11-member board appointed by the governor, and they are charged with coming up with standards for what teachers have to essentially have to do to have their licensure. And not only do you have to be licensed as a teacher, but you have to renew that license periodically. I'm not actually sure how frequently you have to do it. And when I was a kid, I remember that teachers at the school that I had to, they had to do like professional training and even additional coursework at like the college level to continue to have their licensure. They had to update it. So essentially, this is really important. It will affect every licensed teacher in Minnesota, these changes to the law, or to the standards, I should say.
So I have to ask them, Moses, what are the proposed changes specifically, and what do you think the effects are going to be upon Minnesotan citizens, students, parents?
So yes, and I will get to that. I want to say before I forget, I want to shout out to Child Protection League. They're a group here in Minnesota, and they really stand up for kids and for parental rights, and so anything affecting those areas, they're right on top of this. So I'm looking at the standards, but I'm looking at the standards that CPL has already gone through, and they've looked at it and they've highlighted some of the really dangerous parts. So, but also I wanted to shout out to Pastor Jarvis at Hosanna LCMS in Buffalo, Minnesota, because he emailed me yesterday about this exact same thing and helped get it to the top of my brain as something to talk about today. So let's get into the standards. Now, we're going to include this in the show notes. And if you are at all connected with education, if you have kids in a school, or if you are a teacher or a retired teacher or anything like that, you've got to take a look, because this stuff is nuts.
I've actually had 2 moms that I know reach out to me about this already on Instagram.
Yeah.
So this is something that's affecting people, and people are taking notice.
Yeah, so there's so much here. We need to slim down. There's really, honestly, so many concerning things that I didn't know where to start, but I wanted to keep this relatively brief for you. So I think the 2 basic problems. One, it just the whole philosophy of education. I'm going to read a few quotes. And 2, the racialization of everything. So we'll talk about that.
Critical theory, basically.
Definitely critical theory. So on page 42, and again, you can look at this, it's talking about what teachers have to do. The teacher understands that the historical foundations of education in Minnesota, including laws, policies, and practices that have and continue to create inequitable opportunities, experiences, and outcomes for learners, especially Indigenous students, etc., etc., etc. The teacher understands how prejudice, discrimination, and racism operates at the interpersonal, intergroup, and institutional levels. Now, I'm going to make a grammatical point here. I think because prejudice, discrimination, and racism are 3 different things, I think it should be how they operate rather than operates in that line.
Yeah.
So I'm critiquing the teacher licensing standards on grammar.
That's the only
not
thing
just
he
content.
has to critique.
Yeah. No. Moving on now.
Grammar Nazis.
The rest of it is fine. No, so like it's this idea, and then at the rest of this section, basically the teacher has to not perpetuate oppressive systems and even disrupt oppressive systems. So it's the idea that when you enter into a classroom, Grace, as a teacher, that there's this power dynamic between you and the students, and between the students and the other students, and like all of these competing.
Which isn't that such a sad way to live, and like to teach young kids. Yeah.
Just 2 pages later in these new teacher licensing standards, and again, this is all new language that's being added to the standards it's proposed to add. So the teacher has to understand multiple theories of race and ethnicity. Good heavens, not just one, including but not limited to racial formation, processes of racialization, and intersectionality. The teacher must understand the definitions of and differences between prejudice, discrimination, bias, and racism. The teacher understands how ethnocentrism, Eurocentrism, deficit-based teaching, and white supremacy undermine pedagogical equity. I question whether any of these things are really that much of a factor in Minnesota schools today. Honestly, how much ethnocentrism is there in Minnesota schools? How much Eurocentrism? How much white supremacy is there? Grace, how much white supremacy? Let me finish my question here. How much white supremacy is there in Minnesota schools today? So the teachers, and it continues, the teacher must understand that knowledge, creation, ways of knowing, and teaching are social and cultural practices shaped by race and ethnicity. and often result in racially disparate advantages and disadvantages.
Ways of knowing are shaped by race and ethnicity and operate in like that then result in disadvantage.
Just this idea that when we come into the classroom, the teacher has to just like count the kids by race, treat them differently on the basis of race, because understanding that, you know, Billy might, because of his racial background, might not be able to complete the homework in the assigned time or complete the homework as well. So grade on a curve based on race. Like, is that what we want Minnesota teachers to be doing? So I really so this is how it's summed up. The teacher has to understand the intersection, there's that word, of race and ethnicity with other forms of difference, including class, gender, sexuality, religion, national origin, immigration status, language, ability, and age. So this is honestly an exhausting amount of things outside of the actual subject that a teacher is teaching that he or she has to think about before the teacher enters the classroom in every interaction that they have with kids to get the licensure that they must have to even enter the classroom. They have to be familiar with these leftist claptrap terms. Yeah. And, you know, I want to talk about, you mentioned critical theory, and I wanted to talk about
why it's dangerous.
Yeah, why that's dangerous, to bring something back from our earlier discussions on critical race theory, which you can revisit. We've talked about that on this podcast before. But I wanted to quote Neil Shenvi from the Gospel Coalition, writing about why critical theory is just something that we have to fight against, something that we have to oppose. And so he writes, critical theory claims that members of oppressed groups have special access to truth, which gets to our discussion a moment ago, because of their lived experience of oppression. Such insight is unavailable to members of oppressor groups who are blinded by the privilege. Consequently, any appeals to, quote, objective evidence or, quote, reason made by dominant groups are actually surreptitious bids for continued institutional power. This view is rooted in standpoint theory, organic to Marxism, and repurposed by feminist theory, which argues that knowledge is conditioned and determined by social location. And he continues, this stance is particularly dangerous because it undermines the function of Scripture as the final arbiter of truth, accessible to all. Is it arbiter or arbiter?
Arbiter. I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's arbiter.
Thank you. Arbiter of truth, accessible to all people regardless of their demographics. And then he gives a long list of scripture citations. If a person from an oppressor group appeals to Scripture, his concerns can be dismissed as a veiled attempt to protect his privilege. And frequently that is what's done. Christians will say, we treat, a Christian teacher might say, I treat every student the same because the Bible says there is no longer Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, but they are all one in Christ Jesus. We are called to treat students in an equitable fashion, but that's not enough, because a critical race theorist can come and say that teacher is hiding behind the Bible. They need to understand that members of oppressed groups have special access to truth and need to be treated differently. If you're not treating them differently, you're discriminating against them.
Gnosticism. That's what Vodi Bakum calls ethnic Gnosticism.
Interesting. I haven't come across that term.
Because Gnosticism is basically this very old heresy that has resurfaced like time and time again. But basically, it's this idea that one group of people, whether it's based on something, in this case it's ethnicity, has access to like a secret or hidden knowledge, and other people can't uncover it because it's secret or hidden. And so that is really detrimental too. Like when you say, okay, let's talk about like the Christian context. Yeah. So we're all Christians, but only our black brothers in Christ have access to the actual hidden truth, or to this portion of the truth, because it's hidden to us white people. Like that is antithetical to the gospel right there. And James talks about the sin of partiality.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, does this, Moses, affect non-public school teachers? Because I know a lot of teachers that teach in private schools, or like just different schools. Maybe they're even homeschoolers or have co-ops. Would this affect non-public school teachers?
As far as I'm aware, it will affect all licensed teachers in Minnesota, so that will be private, public, and charter schools. It wouldn't affect a mom teaching her own kids unless she is also a licensed teacher.
Okay.
It wouldn't prevent her from educating her own children at home. In terms of a homeschool co-op or something, I'm not sure how that would work. I imagine that you would have a mix of licensed and unlicensed teachers. It's not illegal to teach if you don't have a license, although it might be illegal to teach in a like a really brick and mortar school setting.
So there's people listening to this podcast right now, probably parents, that are wondering, okay, obviously we disagree with this. This isn't good, but thank you for letting us know. What can they do to stand for truth in their community?
So there have been various hearings on this process. It's a long process, and we are now nothing that various groups, including us, have done to attempt to change these standards has been effective up to this point. So there was a hearing on August 24th. And now there is a post-hearing comment period. And we will include the link in the show notes. And that extends to September 13th, 2022. And so if, having reviewed the rules, you would like to make a comment saying that these rules are wrong for Minnesota teachers, that they do not add to the quality of education in this state, you can go to that link. You can make a comment. You can also attach documents to your comment, and those comments will be made available to the public. So please take action. You know, the state needs to hear from parents and from teachers, and to hear that these simply unacceptable. It's an unacceptable change to the way that we address who is and who is not qualified to be a teacher. I personally don't think, in conclusion, that a teacher who is steeped in critical race theory is likely to be the most qualified teacher in any given area. And yet that's the thrust of this document, that you need to understand all of the terms, intersectionality, racial oppression, et cetera, and that's how you become the best teacher you can be. That's what the state of Minnesota is telling teachers. So enough about that. Do take time to comment. Speaking of ways in which the state is just overstepping the mark, Grace, Attorney General Ellison issued a statement this week that really is going to affect pregnancy resource centers across the state. So tell us what he did.
So really, he's just furthering this whole stigmatization. Is that how you say it? Stigmatization. There we go. Of pregnancy resource centers, which is, I mean, we've seen this from before, nothing new. But every time he does something like this, I'm just personally offended on behalf of preborn children and on behalf of women. Yeah. So here's what he did. He joined California and Massachusetts and a few other states on Tuesday of this week in issuing a quote-unquote consumer alert about crisis pregnancy centers located across our nation, but his was specifically about Minnesotan ones, right? And he cited a long report written by abortion advocates as his justification.
Including gender justice.
I was going to bring that up. Yep. Gender justice. Yep. Okay, so here's what he said in a statement about this. He said, the Minnesota Constitution guarantees the right to safe and legal abortion, which is true according to our Constitution, which is why we're going to work to get rid of that. He says many crisis pregnancy centers.
Well, it's not in the Constitution. The Minnesota Constitution guarantees no such thing, but the Minnesota Supreme Court in Doe v. Gomez, as we've discussed, has claimed that the Constitution creates the right to abortion.
Right. Thank you. Yep. And then he goes on to say many crisis pregnancy centers claim to offer comprehensive health care, but their purpose is to prevent pregnant people from accessing that right, which sometimes they accomplish by misleading, misinforming, or deceiving people. And this alert that he sent out claims that crisis pregnancy centers may pose, quote, as reproductive health care clinics despite not providing comprehensive reproductive health care or, quote, any health care services at all. And I'm just like, which ones? Have you seen any pregnancy resource centers, Moses, that don't provide any health care?
I actually literally just went to the website of a pregnancy resource center the other day. Because I had been making a donation to them, and at the bottom it says Metro Women's Center does not perform abortions or refer women to abortions. So I don't know how you think that they're misleading people into it's just like
that's on
Ellison's whole claim is that this is misleading.
Right.
Like they're saying, come here, get an abortion. They're never saying that.
Never. Nope. They also were claiming that. Well, I'll get to that later. But yeah, they don't say that. They never claim that you can go get abortion care at these facilities. So yeah. Our friend, our ally, Tim Miller, Representative Tim Miller, over at Pro-Life Action Ministries, actually made a comment on this, which I want to read because I thought it was really good. He said, "This radical attack on pregnancy care centers by Attorney General Ellison sends a clear message. Do not get in the way of us killing children, or we will come after you. His orders are meant to intimidate through false propaganda using the power of his position," which is absolutely true, right? Mm-hmm. It is a radical attack, and yeah. Moses, you also made a really good comment.
Well, thank
Alpha
you.
News came to Minnesota Family Council and asked for our comment on what went down, and Moses was ready with some fire. This is what he said. He said, "In fact, it is Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers who lie to women and mislead them about the short and long-term health effects of abortion, which always ends a child's life and often leads to lasting harm to women." Boom. There goes the dynamite. So what we're seeing here by our Attorney General is he's manipulating the facts, because in reality, right, all these things he's claiming about pregnancy resource centers that, by the way, outnumber Planned Parenthood on a very large scale. Mm-hmm. He's claiming that these resource centers don't provide comprehensive health care. Well, actually, that's Planned Parenthood doesn't provide comprehensive health care. If you look at the numbers, if you look at their annual report, right?
Remember that whole thing a few years ago about how they were like, we provide cancer care. And then it like turned out that they had done
0.01%.
And like that they had never actually performed a mammogram. Like, it's just, it was such a kabuki theater, if I could use that. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. So
you don't want me to explain what that is?
I do not want your sense.
Okay, fine. I guess it'll be just one of those mysteries for the ages.
Anyways, so this is astounding because in our state, just this summer, Moses, 3 crisis pregnancy resource centers and MCCL, Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life, their office have been vandalized this summer. Yeah. So really what we want to see from our Attorney General, who that's a very important office, we want to see him condemning these acts of domestic terrorism, right? Yeah. What we don't want him to see is come out and further demonize pro-life pregnancy resource centers that provide women with the care they both need and deserve.
And can I say something more about that? Yep. Because like he's saying that these people are providing fake healthcare services, but let's look at the facts. Mm-hmm. Every year, crisis pregnancy centers around this country provide 750,000 pregnancy tests. That is a medical procedure that you can have done in a medical clinic. They provide 500,000 free ultrasounds. Again, that is a medical procedure that you can have done in a medical clinic. And if you don't go to a crisis pregnancy center to get an ultrasound, you're going to go to a regular clinic and get an ultrasound. Even Planned Parenthood conducts ultrasounds. It's a healthcare offering, a healthcare product. Mm-hmm. Now, Ellison's comment said something about ultrasound specifically, and he said specifically that it was like fake ultrasounds or something. Or like he said it was an ultrasound with no medical purpose, which I just find absurd. Another thing crisis pregnancy centers do, they provide 160,000 STI or STD tests every year. Yep. And they provide education as well. Almost 900,000 young people every year attend seminars, education at a CPC about sexual risk avoidance. So like this is what Attorney General Ellison is calling quote unquote deceptive. And it's just parroting the talking points of left-wing organizations like Gender Justice.
Which I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Because Ellison went out and issued this consumer alert based on a report which is co-signed by Gender Justice and other similar organizations throughout a few different states.
It was prepared by Gender Justice. Yeah. The Minnesota portion of it.
Was it really? Okay. Yeah. And this is like their graphic, their branding. I'll have our producer Jack put it on the screen. But it's like this pretty colors, this really good graphic, like really good design, I should say. And it's this long multi-page document, right? This report, and it says on the top, designed to deceive pregnancy resource centers, right?
It's so lazy that Ellison's office is reusing this.
It is. And this is an alliance for state advocates for women's rights and gender equality across multiple states, right? And this is their bottom line. They exist to show the facts, according to them, which are the facts that crisis pregnancy centers are anti-abortion organizations, darn right, that seek to reach low-income people facing unplanned pregnancies to prevent them from accessing abortion and contraception. They say that pregnancy resource centers advance this mission by using deceptive and coercive tactics and medical disinformation, and misleadingly presenting themselves as medical facilities. Mm-hmm. So their whole goal is to do this, right? Is to like somehow expose pregnancy resource centers. And here's the thing. They admit that the pro-life revolution is winning, because they say on like the first few pages, they say that the abortion movement's two primary strategies: one, passing abortion bans, and two, expanding crisis pregnancy center networks with taxpayer money, are winning in states. Mm-hmm. And they're scared about that.
Yeah.
And they're also scared because they say that modern crisis pregnancy resource centers have revitalized strategies to target Black women, who are more likely than women to face barriers to medical care and pregnancy resources. And what I want to say to that is, what's bad about us, the pro-life revolution, trying to reach women that we know are in hard situations, are facing unplanned pregnancies, that need medical support, that need financial assistance. Yeah. Because pregnancy resource centers provide women with completely 100% free care. Now, Planned Parenthood, of course, not free. And Planned Parenthood actually actively targets Black women. Mm-hmm. They've tweeted out before that it's like statistically safer in America if you're a Black woman to have an abortion than to give birth. And they're like #scary stats. And they specifically put themselves in minority neighborhoods. And they're saying, okay, because we, the pro-life generation, put ourselves in minority neighborhoods on purpose to help Black women, we are unloving. Well, we're giving women free health care. And you're trying to make her pay, and you're trying to murder her child. Yeah. So there's that. They also admit that crisis pregnancy resource centers, I love that they admit this, outnumber abortion clinics nationwide by an average of 3-1. And in Minnesota, it's 11-1.
Wow.
11-1.
That's amazing.
Darn right. That's what I said in my notes. I was like, darn right. That's true. Yeah. So they're trying to make this like all dramatic. But one of the other reasons they oppose pregnancy resource centers is because they promote the abortion pill reversal, which has saved countless lives. Mm-hmm. We know this from personal testimony. I love this particular thing because like you'll have doctors and pro-abortion people wringing their hands over the abortion pill reversal. It doesn't work. Yeah, it's just like it's there fake. Are literally kids alive where you can prove that their mom took an abortion pill and then did the reversal and then the kid was born. There are hundreds, perhaps even thousands of kids alive now today because of that. And it's just like, what are you claiming that didn't happen? Or just like not a Chicken Little approach. You just like ignoring the fact that something is happening, just like it's just so, I don't know, it just makes me laugh. Right. So they know that the abortion pill reversal is something that pregnancy resource centers generally promote and explain, like this is a thing, right? Yeah. So they say that abortion pill reversal is an unethical practice and a non-scientific claim, to which it's unethical to save lives now. Yeah. And it's non-scientific. How, right? That reminds me of that part in The Incredibles where Mr. Incredible has just saved a guy who is jumping from a building, right? He was committing suicide. And then the guy gets mad at him. And Mr. Incredible was like, hey, I saved your life. And the guy goes, you didn't save my life, you ruined my death. And it's just like, so this idea that it was unethical for Mr. Incredible to save someone who is actively committing suicide is kind of, that's pretty much the level of saying that it's quote unquote unethical to administer to the mother a safe medication that has a good chance of reversing the abortion pill so that she can continue with her healthy pregnancy and deliver a child. I really like that. That's a great point. Yeah. So, and then the other thing that they have problems with, that this report has problems with, is the fact that pregnancy resource centers, quote unquote, seek to intercept people seeking health care. They say that operated mobile units are located near abortion facilities to confuse patients. Oh, the atrocity. That's about as confusing and as deceptive as a taco truck.
Honestly, it's
free ultrasound.
They'll give you free diapers and a free ultrasound and a free pregnancy test,
and free
STD
financial
test.
assistance and free community and free parenting classes and all these free things. And that's so deceptive. Like, okay,
unbelievable.
The difference between the taco truck and the pregnancy resource center is that the tacos aren't free, folks.
Exactly. I tried to get the tacos for free. They called the police on me.
Ooh, confession time.
Just kidding.
One of their other points is that from their major study findings at a glance is that these pregnancy resource centers appear to be local, but are part of a global anti-abortion network, which is like all this fear-mongering. And it's just so funny because they make this sound so dramatic and they're like, look, we have to rise up. But in reality, what they're saying is, look, the pro-life revolution is winning. We're losing. We're in deep doo-doo. Someone help us. They're like floundering, like barely treading water. So here's the deal. I looked at all our citations because I was like, this report clearly is not true. Like, Moses has said the stats. I know the stats. We've seen the stats. We know the facts, right? Their most common citations, let's guess what they're from. They're from, one, NARAL. So that's great. Pro-choice in America. Guttmacher Institute, which a lot of people don't know this, but that's actually Planned Parenthood's former research arm. So they're very closely affiliated with Planned Parenthood. Yeah, it's named
after Dr. Alan Guttmacher, who was one of the founders of Planned Parenthood. And then, so they're completely unbiased, though, of course.
Right, of course. And then, like, the other things I cite the most are feminist op-eds about, like, white fragility, misogyny, blah, 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 the patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. And then they cite gender justice, too. So they cite all these pro-choice people, organizations, etc. And so really this report, as we knew from the very beginning, is completely unfounded, right? Yeah. So I still get a laugh over that marketing where it's like designed to deceive.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So yeah, that's my spiel on that. Moses, do you have any closing thoughts on that story? It is, like I say, it is very depressing that we have an attorney general that isn't denouncing domestic terrorist attacks on PRCs. Instead, he's actually demonizing them.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think going back to that design to deceive thing, I think that's just one of the weakest attacks that I've ever seen, in the sense that, like, they can't attack the pregnancy resources. Well, I'm sure they could for providing resources that would help women get over the sort of the fear stage of having become pregnant and being in an unexpected, unplanned pregnancy, saying, hey, don't worry, this isn't the end of the world. We'll support you. We have all of these free resources, free prenatal care, free resources, like parenting classes, as Grace said, that will help you at every step of the way. So they can't attack, like, in terms of just the rhetorical move that they're making, they can't attack pregnancy resource centers for doing those good things.
Well, one thing they actually said, they were like, and they make their clients earn points to get free baby clothes. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Wow. So, wow. They get free baby clothes if they attend a parenting class. Oh, the atrocity. Manipulation.
That is high level Ponzi scheme level deception right there. It's just like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So the whole design to deceive thing is just so flimsy. These pregnancy centers are not claiming to be abortion clinics. That's so clear. They're claiming not to be abortion clinics. They do not perform abortions.
They're claiming to provide health care. And guess what? They provide health care. Planned Parenthood claims to provide health care. Guess what they do? Only provide abortions.
Yeah.
So there we go. Maybe Planned Parenthood is designed to deceive.
Yeah?
Ooh,
yeah.
Okay, maybe we should come up with our own report. That'd be hilarious.
That would be.
So, Moses, give our audience here at the Family Beacon a little bit of a teaser as to something that will be coming out on our blog this week, written by our content writer, about this new discriminatory policy.
Yeah, so if you guys don't read our blog, it's a really good opportunity to remember that the Family Beacon is not just a podcast, it is also a blog, mfc.org/Family Beacon, and you can get the top stories in text form. Not everything that's on the podcast is going to be on the blog, but sometimes not everything that's on the blog is on the podcast. So you actually get a ton of new content that you can read and share. And this week, we're not able, because of time, to talk about this on the podcast, but I will give you a little teaser of this article by Luke Mueller, our content writer, because folks have been reaching out to me about this as well. The Minneapolis Federation of Teachers has a contract language that is racially discriminatory, and the idea is that in the case of layoffs, white teachers have to be fired first. Because usually it goes by seniority, but in this case, it's going based on seniority and race. So it's a little complicated, but the upshot is that, we're how many decades after the Civil Rights Act, which said that the government entities, and let's be clear, Minneapolis Public Schools is a government entity, cannot discriminate on the basis of skin color, and we're getting discrimination on the basis of skin color. It's just incredible. So check out that article. And I'm excited. I have not read it yet, and I'm very excited to do so.
We'll have it linked in the description, and it will be out in our weekly email. And if you haven't subscribed to that yet, go to mfc.org/subscribe.
Yes, please do. So, Grace, coming to the end of the podcast here, please tell us what you're reading.
Okay. Well, I feel like we haven't talked about this in a while, so I have to catch people up. I recently read Death by Living by N.D. Wilson and Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl by N.D. Wilson, which they both go hand in hand, but it's really good. He just talks about so many things. Like, it's kind of, in my mind, it's very similar to Ecclesiastes, which that's my favorite book of the Bible, and I recently read it this summer. But he talks about how all of life is dying, right? And so we're either dying well or we're dying poorly. And we're going to die empty either way, but we're either going to die after emptying ourselves for ourselves, or we're going to die emptying ourselves for others. And the choice is ours, right? Yeah. And he makes a lot of other really good points. But I think that was my biggest takeaway. It's just, it was a great read, pretty easy read too. So highly recommend that. If you're wondering, like, what the heck is up with Ecclesiastes? Like, how do we live knowing everything is dust, but at the same time, God gives us these good gifts of earth, right? So that, and then I'm actually currently reading, because I already read those, Designing Your Life, I think it's called, and there's like a subtitle that I'm forgetting. But it's
think that title, I don't know anything about the book, but the title really seems like something that would appeal to Grace.
Moses knows I'm organized. So it's actually for my class. My class is called Leadership and Vocation, which is I'm a senior. What? That's for a class, and it's pretty good so far. It is a secular book, but so far it's pretty good. I like it, and I'm reading a few other books too, but they're more like devotional books. So yeah, that's what I'm reading. How about you, Moses?
So I definitely talked about Anna Karenina. I finished that. That was
Did you
really
like
good.
it? How many stars?
I loved it. 5 stars.
5 stars?
Absolutely, 100%.
So good.
It is surprisingly, and I've talked with Anna about this. It's shorter than War and Peace, which is what I was kind of expecting. And it's in some ways, it's a better depiction of marriage than almost any book that I've read, which is kind of crazy because it's well known as being a depiction of infidelity and adultery. So I actually think I might have mentioned that on the podcast before, which if so, forgive me. After that, I read a book called Ronald Reagan, the American President by Larry Schweikert, which I think I also mentioned. And I finished that. That was good, 3.5 stars. Okay. And now I'm reading 2 books. I'm reading... oh my gosh, what's it called? It's a book
Pulls up his Goodreads. Wait, we should link our Goodreads. That would be hilarious. Oh, it's because we're such nerds.
Oh, well, yes, I am pretty active.
We will link both.
We're both pretty active on Goodreads. That's the social network that I prefer. Yeah, Brianna's
constantly liking my updates. She's like, Brianna Bradstreet has liked Grace Evans' goal of 50 books for 2022.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm reading Seasons in the Sun, The Battle for Britain, 1974 to 1979, Dominic Sandbrook. It's about a season in a country where there was really poor economic policy, galloping inflation, racial tension. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting book about a really interesting period in British history. I'm really into British history. That's what I did my master's dissertation on. So that's interesting. And then I'm also starting a novel called Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner. And it is also a depiction of marriage. And I'm really interested in that. It was recommended to me by a friend. I haven't gotten very far in it. But yeah, also, one thing I want to do, if not on the podcast, I want to do it on my personal channel. I want to compare children's Bibles because we have at least 3 children's Bibles and then 3 to 6 other devotional books.
Yeah.
And Mary has been in a phase where she's really been wanting that. So we have one upstairs and one downstairs.
Do you have like the blue cover with like the picture, the oval picture in the middle? It's like
the Jesus Storybook Bible?
Yeah.
The Jesus Storybook Bible?
What's the author?
By Sally Lloyd Jones or something?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that's the one of the ones we have, and it's one of the biggest selling ones. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of thoughts on various children's Bibles, mostly good thoughts. I actually find them so helpful.
Yeah,
reading
we
them.
could do like an episode on our top favorite children's literature, and then we could also combine it with like.
Oh man, I would love to do that. And then we could
also talk about in Sunday school rooms or nurseries when they have like pictures of the ark and it's like rainbows and butterflies and sunshine.
Yeah, that's a good time to remind our viewers and listeners that I met Grace when she was one of my pupils in a Sunday school class.
You met me there? I think I met you before that, didn't I?
Well, but no, that's probably true.
Yeah, I met him before that. But yeah, I think we were going through Proverbs, and then he went and left our church and left us without a Sunday school teacher.
That's not true. COVID happened.
Excommunicated. No.
COVID happened, and then
he turned Lutheran. And now he has a buffalo in his Twitter bio, and he thinks he's so cool.
I'm not on Twitter anymore, guys.
Oh,
but anyway, this is all fluff, folks. This has been the Family Beacon from Minnesota Family Council, where you can get the facts on all these incredibly important things that you probably didn't hear about anywhere else because nobody is covering these stories. But Grace and I are bringing you the facts so that you can stand for truth. Remember, check out the links in our bio. Take action on the issues that matter. And tune in next week for another killer episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.